At my daughter's elegant dinner party, she introduced me to everyone. This is my housekeeper. I allow him to stay to take care of the children and housework. The entire room fell silent, everyone looking at me with pitying eyes. But then her boss froze his wine glass, trembling in his hand, and he said one sentence that destroyed my daughter's career and exposed all the lies from all those years. My daughter was shocked, as if about to faint. "I'm so glad you're here. Where are you watching from? Drop your location in the comments. If that hook struck a nerve, you're not alone." This is a fictional story exploring painful relationship dynamics. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental, but the message about boundaries and dignity is genuinely meaningful. Let's begin. I stand in the corner of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, the silver cufflinks, Eleanor's last gift to me, catching the light of the crystal chandelier in a way that feels too fragile, too distant. The laughter of the upper crust wraps around me like a glass wall I can't break through. I'm holding a tray of wine, a white cloth draped over my forearm, with the precision of someone who's done this too many times before. "This is Theodore, our caretaker." Victoria's voice rings out sharp and confident, cutting through the polite chatter. She doesn't even glance at me when she says it. The entire table nods absently, as if I'm part of the expensive furniture. Kenneth, her husband, smirks and sips his wine, a bottle that costs more than the monthly pension they've been managing for me. But then I catch the eye of a man at the far end of the table. His gaze is stunned, recognizing something that shouldn't be here. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 3 years to the day everything changed. It was a fall afternoon in the Hamptons. The kind of day when the leaves turn that impossible shade of red and the air smells like wood smoke and salt from the ocean. Eleanor and I were walking through the garden behind our estate, the one we'd designed together 25 years ago, back when we were just 2 kids with a drafting table and a dream. She stopped to admire the maples, her hand resting lightly on my arm. "Look at that Theodore," she said softly. "Isn't it beautiful?" I smiled. "Not as beautiful as you." She laughed. God, I can still hear that laugh. And then her hand tightened on my arm. Not in affection, in pain. "Eleanor." Her eyes went wide, confused, and then she collapsed. Just like that. One moment, she was standing beside me, and the next, she was in my arms. Her breath shallow, her face pale. I shouted for help, called 911, held her as tightly as I could. But it didn't matter. By the time the ambulance arrived, she was gone. A hidden heart condition, the doctors said later. She'd never shown symptoms, she'd never complained, and now she was gone. At 57 years old, I became a man without a foundation. I was an architect who'd lost his blueprint. Eleanor had been my partner in everything business, life, love. We'd built an empire worth $95 million from sketches on a kitchen table. We'd raised Victoria together. We'd dreamed together. And now, standing in that garden surrounded by red leaves, I felt like the world had been erased. The funeral was a blur. Hundreds of people came, business associates, old clients, friends from the country club. But I barely remember their faces. I remember standing at the graveside, staring at the mahogany casket, thinking that it should have been me instead. I remember the weight of Victoria's hand on mine. "Chad," she said quietly, her voice breaking. "Come live with us. Kenneth and I will take care of you. You shouldn't be alone." I looked at her, then my only child, 33 years old, polished and put together in her black dress, her eyes red from crying. She looked so much like Eleanor in that moment that it hurt to breathe. "Are you sure?" I asked. "Of course, Dad. You're family. We'll take care of you." I believed her. I needed to believe her. I needed somewhere to go, somewhere that didn't echo with Eleanor's absence. So I said yes. I packed up a few things from the Hamptons estate, my clothes, a few photographs, Eleanor's silver cufflinks, and I moved into Victoria and Kenneth's home. That was my first mistake. For the first few months, it seemed like it might work. Victoria was attentive. Kenneth was polite. And their twin boys, Jackson and Noah, just 4 years old at the time, were a bright spot in the darkness. I helped around the house, played with the boys, tried to be useful. I thought I was healing. I thought I was finding a new normal. But slowly, things began to shift. Small things at first. Victoria would ask me to pick up groceries, then to cook dinner, then to clean up after the boys. Kenneth started making jokes about how lucky I was to have a place to stay, and I told myself it was fine. I told myself I was contributing, that I was being helpful. I told myself I wasn't a burden. I should have known better. Now, 3 years later, I'm standing in this restaurant with a tray of wine, watching my daughter introduce me as our caretaker to a room full of strangers. I'm watching Kenneth smirk into his glass. I'm watching that man at the end of the table stare at me like he's seen a ghost. And I'm thinking about Eleanor's cufflinks still catching the light. Victoria promised she would take care of me. I believed her. That was my first mistake. In the 6 months that followed, she almost kept that promise in the worst possible way. The first 6 months after Eleanor died, Victoria genuinely seemed to care. Or maybe I was just too deep in grief to see clearly. Those early weeks are a fog in my memory. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, forgetting for a split second that Eleanor was gone, reaching across the bed for her. The twins would leave drawings under my door, stick figures of Grandpa and 2 little boys under a smiling sun. Victoria would check on me, bring me coffee, ask if I'd eaten. Kenneth kept his distance, but he was polite enough. It felt like kindness. It felt like family. I should have known better. The changes started so slowly I didn't notice them at first. That's how the best traps work, isn't it? You don't throw a frog into boiling water. You heat it up 1 degree at a time. By the 4th month, I was beginning to function again. I'd started taking morning walks on the beach, thinking about maybe consulting again, reconnecting with old colleagues. That's when Victoria came to me with a stack of papers. "Would Dad let me handle the bills for you?" she said, setting them down on the kitchen table with a sympathetic smile. "You've got enough on your plate. Estate taxes, property management, investment accounts. It's a lot. Let me take care of it so you can focus on healing." It made sense. I was tired. The paperwork felt overwhelming, so I signed the power of attorney thinking it was temporary, thinking she was helping. That was the first brick in the wall I didn't see being built around me. Kenneth started filling my wine cellar with bottles of 18-year-old Macallan and 30-year-old Glenfiddich cases, arriving every few weeks. He'd joke about upgrading my collection. He moved his gaming setup into my office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the water, the one where Eleanor and I used to sit together and sketch designs late into the night. He called it his man cave now. I told myself it was fine. I wasn't using the space anyway. By the end of the first year, I realized I wasn't sitting at the dining table anymore during Victoria's dinner parties. I was in the kitchen plating appetizers, refilling wine glasses, loading the dishwasher, while her friends laughed in the other room. When had that started? I couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. It had just happened. "Theodore, could you grab more ice?" "Theodore, the Hendersons are out of wine." "Theodore, the boys need their baths." Never Dad. Always Theodore. Like I was staff. By year 2, I'd become invisible in my own home. I was doing laundry, scrubbing floors, driving Jackson and Noah to soccer practice and piano lessons. Victoria's friends would walk past me in the hallway and not make eye contact, as if acknowledging me would be uncomfortable. I was part of the furniture, useful but unremarkable. One afternoon, I found all of my things, photographs, Eleanor's jewelry box, my architectural awards, packed into boxes in the garage. My master bedroom, the one Eleanor and I had shared for 2 decades, had been converted into Victoria's walk-in closet. Racks of designer clothes, shelves of shoes, a vanity mirror with lights like a Hollywood dressing room. "Oh, we needed more space," Victoria said when I asked. "You don't mind, do you? You're barely using that attic room anyway." The attic room. The small guest bedroom with the slanted ceiling and the single window that overlooked the driveway. That's where I was now. Not the master suite. Not even a proper guest room. The attic. I stood there staring at rows of Chanel bags and Louboutin heels where my bed used to be, and I felt something inside me crack. Not break. Not yet. But crack. 6 months ago, I was walking past Victoria's study when I heard her on the phone. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. The door was open. "He's useful, honestly." She was saying, her tone light, almost amused. "Free childcare, and he keeps the house spotless. Why wouldn't we keep him?" She laughed. I don't remember walking away. I don't remember going back to my attic room. I just remember sitting on the edge of that narrow bed, staring at my hands, the same hands that had designed skyscrapers, that had held Eleanor as she died, that had built a $95 million empire from nothing. And now those hands were scrubbing toilets. I thought about the power of attorney I'd signed. I thought about the master bedroom that was now a closet. I thought about Kenneth treating my office like a rec room and my wine cellar like his personal liquor store. I thought about Victoria's laugh on that phone call. Free childcare. Keeps the house spotless. Why wouldn't we keep him? I'd spent 2 years telling myself this was temporary, that Victoria was helping me, that I was contributing to the household, that this was what family did. But family doesn't treat you like hired help. Family doesn't erase you from your own home. Family doesn't laugh about keeping you around because you're useful. I stood up and walked downstairs. The house was quiet. Victoria and Kenneth had taken the boys to a birthday party. I walked through the rooms, slowly seeing them as if for the first time. The living room where I wasn't allowed to sit because the furniture is for guests. The dining room where I served but didn't eat. The kitchen where I worked but didn't belong. The office that was no longer mine. The wine cellar stocked with Kenneth's expensive tastes. The master bedroom. My bedroom, Eleanor's bedroom, transformed into a shrine to Victoria's vanity. I ended up standing in the doorway of that walk-in closet surrounded by designer labels and the faint smell of expensive perfume. This was the room where Eleanor had died in my arms, not literally, but close enough. We'd spent our last nights together here talking about retirement plans, about traveling, about finally slowing down. And now it was full of shoes. I felt my patience worn thin over 2 years of slow erosion finally run dry. It wasn't pain anymore. It was something harder than pain. Clearer. Colder. It was determination. I wasn't going to be the frog in the boiling water anymore. I was going to get out. And when I did, I was going to make sure the people who put me there understood exactly what they'd done. Victoria thought she'd trapped me. She thought I was broken, defeated, too grief-stricken to fight back. She had no idea who I used to be, and she was about to find out. The first time I truly saw what my daughter had become was the night she tried to erase me from the history of my own house. It was a Thursday evening. Victoria was hosting her book club, 8 women from the country club, all designer handbags and expensive highlights, gathered in the living room I'd designed with Eleanor back when Victoria was still in elementary school. I was serving tea and finger sandwiches, moving quietly between the chairs, like a ghost in my own home. "Chukitate, this estate is absolutely stunning, Victoria," one of the women said, gesturing at the vaulted ceilings, the custom millwork, the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the ocean view. Victoria smiled, the gracious hostess. "Thank you. Kenneth and I bought it 5 years ago. It needed a lot of work, but we've really made it our own." My hand froze mid-pour, the teapot hovering over Mrs. Henderson's cup. 5 years ago. 5 years ago, Eleanor was still alive. 5 years ago, this house had been ours for 20 years already. I'd designed every inch of it, the curved staircase, the library, with the hidden bar, the sunroom where Eleanor grew orchids. I'd spent 2 years working with contractors, architects, craftsmen to build this place from the ground up. We'd moved in when Victoria was 7 years old, and she was sitting there telling her friends that she and Kenneth had bought it. "Victoria, dear," Mrs. Henderson was saying, "you have such an eye for design." "Oh, I can't take all the credit," Victoria said modestly. "We hired an excellent interior designer. She helped us modernize everything." I looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. The walls where family photographs used to hang pictures of Eleanor and me at our wedding. Victoria's childhood portraits, snapshots from vacations and holidays, were now covered with oversized abstract paintings. Sterile, impersonal. The mantel where Eleanor's collection of vintage books had sat was now arranged with geometric sculptures and minimalist vases. They hadn't just redecorated. They'd erased us. I set down the teapot carefully and walked out of the room. No one noticed. I stood in the hallway, my back against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. This was my house, my blueprints, my vision. And Victoria was rewriting the story, casting herself as the creator and me as what, a prop, a servant who came with the furniture. That's when I heard Victoria's voice from the foyer. "Yes, that one," she was saying. "It doesn't fit the aesthetic anymore. Can you have your team move it to storage this weekend?" I walked toward the sound and found her standing with a young woman holding an iPad, the interior designer, I assumed. They were looking at Eleanor's chair, the velvet armchair in the reading nook by the window, deep burgundy with carved wooden legs and a high back. Eleanor had given it to me for my 50th birthday 6 years before she died. She'd had it custom made, joked that I needed a throne befitting an architectural king. I'd spent countless evenings in that chair reading, sketching, watching the sunset over the water. "Wait," I said, my voice sharper than I intended. "That chair stays." Victoria turned her expression briefly annoyed before smoothing into something that might have passed for sympathy if you didn't know her. "Dad, we're updating the space. That chair was a gift from Eleanor." "I know. But Mom's gone and you need to move on." She glanced at the designer, then back at me, her voice dropping to something quieter, more condescending. "It's been 3 years. Holding on to old furniture isn't going to bring her back." I stared at my daughter, at this woman who looked like the little girl I'd pushed on swings and taught to ride a bike and walked down the aisle at her wedding. And I didn't recognize her. "That chair isn't going anywhere," I said. "Actually," Victoria said, her tone turning cold, "it is. This is my house now, Dad. You signed the power of attorney, remember? You put me in charge of everything, finances, property management, all of it. So if I say the chair goes to storage, it goes to storage." The designer looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting between us. "You can keep your books and your photos in your room." Victoria continued, her voice sharp now, no pretense of kindness left. "But the rest of the house reflects my taste. If you don't like it, you're welcome to find your own place." She held my gaze, daring me to challenge her. I thought about the power of attorney I'd signed 18 months ago. I thought about the legal documents I'd never read carefully, trusting Victoria when she said it was just to help manage things. I thought about the fact that my name was still on the deed to this house, or at least I hoped it was, and I thought about the fact that I had no idea what Victoria had actually done with those papers. "Fine," I said quietly. Victoria blinked, surprised. She'd been expecting a fight. "Take the chair," I continued. "Do whatever you want." Her expression shifted to something almost triumphant. "I'm glad you're being reasonable about this." I nodded and walked away. Behind me, I heard her instructing the designer to schedule the movers. I didn't go back to the book club. I didn't go to my attic room. I walked out to the garden, the one Eleanor and I had planted together. The one with the red maples that turned brilliant in the fall. And I stood there until the sun went down and the guests left and the house went quiet. I wasn't letting Victoria take the chair because I believed her lies. I wasn't backing down because I thought she was right. I was letting her take the chair because I needed time. Time to think. Time to plan. Time to call the one person who could tell me the truth about what I'd signed and what rights I still had. The next morning, while Victoria was at the gym and Kenneth was nursing a hangover in what used to be my office, I went into the small storage closet under the attic stairs, the one place they never bothered to look, and pulled out the box where I'd kept Eleanor's important papers, our marriage certificate, the deed to the house, the estate documents. And I made the phone call I should have made 2 years ago. Hayes and Associates, how may I direct your call? Patricia Hayes, please. I said, my voice steady. Tell her Theodore Harrison is calling. It's urgent. The next morning, I made the call. What Patricia told me changed everything. And then 2 men in expensive suits showed up looking for Kenneth. Patricia Hayes had been our family attorney for 20 years. Her voice was sharp with concern. Theodore, listen carefully. A power of attorney does not transfer ownership. It gives someone authority to manage finances, pay bills, handle transactions. But the house, your assets, still yours. 100%. Unless you signed a deed transfer which requires notarization and county filing, that house is legally yours. Relief flooded through me, followed by cold fury. Victoria had been lying for months. There's something else, Patricia said. If Victoria is trying to control your assets this aggressively, she might be planning a conservatorship. It's when a court declares someone mentally incapacitated and appoints a conservator to take over completely. She'd need medical evidence, but Theodore, if she's already rewriting history and isolating you, this could be her endgame. Get a full medical evaluation immediately. Cognitive tests, psychiatric assessment, something that proves you're of sound mind, and document everything. I already am. Good. And Theodore, be careful. If she realizes you're building a case, she might accelerate. Over the next few days, I became a ghost by choice. I moved quietly, observed, listened. I kept a journal hidden in the storage closet under the attic stairs, documenting every dismissive comment, every transaction I could access. That's when I discovered the withdrawals. $75,000 from the household account over 6 months. $53,000 from savings. Victoria's signature on every transfer. I was reviewing the bank statements when the doorbell rang. 2 men stood on the porch. Mid-40s, tailored suits. They didn't look like salesmen. Good afternoon, the tall one said politely. We're looking for Kenneth. Is he home? Who's asking, friends of Frankie's? The lean one smiled without warmth. Kenneth knows who we are. I heard footsteps behind me. Kenneth had gone pale, frozen on the stairs. Gentlemen, he said, voice tight. This isn't a good time. Frankie thinks it's a great time, the tall one said. 6 months is a long time to wait for $1.5 million. $1.5 million. Kenneth's eyes darted to me. I'm working on it. Tell Frankie I'm working on it. He knows. Nice place, by the way. The lean one glanced at the marble foyer. Maybe sell something. Speed things up. The tall one handed Kenneth a card. 2 weeks. Frankie's generosity has limits. After they left, Kenneth stood gripping the banister, ashen. I closed the door. $1.5 million, I said quietly. How? Poker. Sports betting. His voice was hollow. I thought I could win it back. It got out of control. And Victoria knows. He nodded. She's been using your accounts to pay it down. We've given them $400,000 so far. $400,000. From my money. She told me you'd signed everything over, Kenneth said, voice cracking. That you wanted her to manage it. She lied. To both of us. I saw genuine fear in his eyes. Victoria had him trapped just as surely as she'd trapped me. His cage was built from debt, mine from grief. That night I heard voices downstairs. I crept to the top of the staircase. Don't care if he's suspicious. Victoria's voice sharp and cold. If he knows about the accounts, we move faster. Move faster? How? Kenneth sounded panicked. The conservatorship. I've already talked to a lawyer. We file next month. I'll get testimony about his behavior, memory lapses, confusion, inappropriate anger. Once the court appoints me conservator, everything's mine. The house, the investments, all of it. And Frankie gets his money. Victoria, he's your father. He's an obstacle. I stood in the darkness, hand gripping the railing. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, to take everything, to erase me completely. I went back to my room and pulled out my hidden journal. I wrote down everything I'd just heard, word for word. Then I looked at the evidence I'd been gathering. Bank statements, recorded conversations, photographs of the house before Victoria erased our family from it. Patricia had warned me. Victoria was accelerating, which meant I had to move faster. Tomorrow, I needed two things: a medical evaluation proving I was of sound mind, and a way to protect my assets before Victoria could file her petition. Tomorrow, the fight truly began. Patricia had warned me Victoria might try to have me declared mentally incompetent. I needed proof that I was exactly the opposite. And then Victoria announced a dinner party that would change everything. The morning after overhearing Victoria's conservatorship plan, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I left the house without telling anyone. I called an Uber from the beach access road half a mile from the estate and rode into Manhattan in silence. Victoria couldn't track my car if I didn't use it. Kenneth was nursing another hangover. No one would notice I was gone. Dr. Alan Rodriguez's office was in a glass tower near Central Park. Patricia had recommended him a neuropsychologist, with an impeccable reputation, someone whose testimony would hold up in any court. Mr. Sterling, he said, shaking my hand. Professional mid-50s kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Patricia explained the situation. We'll be thorough today. Cognitive function tests, memory assessments, psychiatric evaluation. Should take about 3 hours. Whatever it takes. He led me through a battery of tests. Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Clock drawing. Word recall. Pattern recognition. He asked me to count backwards from 100 by sevens. He showed me images and asked me to remember them. He questioned me about my life, my work, my recent experiences. I told him about Eleanor, about designing the house, about Victoria erasing our history from the walls, about the power of attorney and the stolen money and Kenneth's gambling debt and the loan sharks and the overheard conversation about conservatorship. Dr. Rodriguez took notes, his expression neutral and professional throughout. Finally, after 3 hours, he set down his pen. Mr. Sterling, I'm going to be frank with you. Your cognitive function is exceptional. You scored in the 95th percentile for your age group, and that's compared to healthy individuals, not the general population. Your memory is sharp, your reasoning is sound, and you show no signs whatsoever of dementia, depression severe enough to impair judgment, or any other condition that would support a conservatorship claim. Relief flooded through me so powerfully I had to grip the armrest of my chair. I'll prepare a comprehensive report, he continued. If anyone attempts to question your mental capacity in court, this documentation will be ironclad. You are by every clinical measure of completely sound mind. Thank you, I managed. Patricia also asked me to note something in my report. He looked at me directly. Antarit, the situation you've described, Isolation, financial exploitation, manipulation by family members. These are classic signs of elder abuse. If this goes to court, that will be documented as well. I left his office with a sealed envelope containing the medical report and walked through Central Park for the first time in years. The fall leaves were turning gold and red. Eleanor would have loved this. I sat on a bench and called Patricia. "I have the report," I said. 95th percentile. No signs of impairment. "Good. That's your legal armor. Keep it somewhere Victoria can't access." "I will. There's something else." I took a breath. Victoria announced she's hosting a dinner party next week. She's trying to impress someone named Charles Morrison. Apparently he's a CEO and she wants an executive VP position at his company. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Charles Morrison," Patricia said slowly. "Theodore, do you remember a young architect you mentored about 25 years ago? Brilliant kid, just out of Columbia, worked with you on the Harbor Towers project." The memory hit me like a physical blow. Charles. 24 years old, eager, talented, hungry to learn. I'd spent 2 years teaching him everything I knew: design principles, client management, how to run a firm. He'd called me his mentor, his inspiration. We'd lost touch after I sold my company, and he moved to commercial development, but I remembered him clearly. "That Charles," I said. "That Charles. He's CEO of Morrison Development now, one of the biggest real estate firms on the East Coast. If Victoria is trying to impress him, and she has no idea he knows you." I could hear the calculation in her voice, the same calculation running through my own mind. "Find me his private number," I said. Theodore, what are you thinking?" "I'm thinking that Victoria is planning to have me declared incompetent and steal everything I own. I'm thinking she's been systematically erasing me from my own life for 3 years. And I'm thinking that next week she's going to introduce me to her boss as what, the caretaker, the help, just like she did at her book club." "And you want to make sure Charles knows who you really are before that happens?" "I want to make sure Charles knows everything." Patricia was quiet for a moment. "I'll get you his number, but Theodore, once you make that call, there's no going back. You're choosing a side. You're choosing war." "Victoria chose war the day she tried to erase Eleanor from our house," I said. "I'm just finally deciding to fight back." That evening I returned to the estate. Victoria was in the living room on her laptop planning the dinner party. She barely glanced up when I walked past. "Theodore, you'll need to serve that night," she said absently. "Cocktails at 7, dinner at 8, and wear something presentable. Mr. Morrison is very important." "Of course," I said. I went upstairs to my attic room and pulled out the sealed medical report. 95th percentile, completely sound mind, legal armor against conservatorship. I tucked it into the hidden box in my closet along with the journal, the bank statements, the recordings. Then I looked at the piece of paper Patricia had texted me an hour ago. A phone number. 10 digits that could change everything. I had 1 week before the dinner party. 1 week to contact Charles. 1 week to decide whether to simply expose Victoria's lies or to orchestrate something far more devastating. That night, I chose revenge. Calling Charles was a gamble. 25 years was a long time and people changed. He might not remember me. He might not care. He might be just as ambitious and ruthless as Victoria and side with her instead. But I had to try. Because Victoria had spent 3 years making me invisible, and I was about to remind her and everyone else exactly who I was. Calling Charles Morrison was a risk. 5 days later, I stood at the dinner party playing the caretaker one last time. Tonight, I would remind Victoria whose house this truly was. 3 days after getting the medical report, I dialed Charles's private number from my car in a grocery store parking lot. "This is Charles Morrison." "Charles, it's Theodore Sterling. I don't know if you remember me, but 25 years ago, Mr. Theodore. His voice cracked. Is it really you? I heard you'd gone into a nursing home. Someone said you had dementia. Victoria had been spreading lies, preparing the ground for her conservatorship claim. I'm not in a nursing home, I said. I'm living with my daughter, and I need to tell you what's been happening. I told him everything. The power of attorney, the erasure from my own house, the stolen money, Victoria's plan to have me declared incompetent. And I told him about the dinner party, how she'd use him to advance her career, how she'd introduced me to her friends as the caretaker. She called you the caretaker. Charles's voice shook with fury. You're Theodore Sterling. You gave me my first real chance when no other firm would hire a kid fresh out of Columbia. You taught me everything. I've spent 25 years trying to live up to the standard you set. Charles. Mr. Theodore, tell me what you want me to do. Come to the dinner party. Act normal. Let Victoria play her game. When the moment is right, I'll give you a signal. Now 5 days later, that moment was here. The dining room gleamed with crystal and candlelight. Victoria had hired caterers, a bartender, even a pianist. 8 guests would decide her promotion. Theodore, Victoria hissed. You stay in the background. You serve drinks, you clear plates, and you do not speak unless spoken to. Don't embarrass me. Of course. Kenneth stood near the fireplace, miserable, jumpy since the loan sharks visited. Victoria believed this dinner would solve everything. Charles Morrison, as an ally, meant bigger deals, enough money to pay off Frankie. If only she knew. Guests arrived at 7. Victoria transformed into the perfect hostess, charming in her black cocktail dress. I moved through the room with champagne invisible. Charles Morrison arrived at 7:30. Taller than I remembered, gray at the temples, perfectly tailored navy suit. His eyes found mine immediately, 1 second of connection, enough to see the anger beneath his professional smile. Then he looked away. Mr. Morrison? Victoria swept forward. Hi, thank you so much for coming. The pleasure is mine. You have a beautiful home. Thank you. We bought it 5 years ago and completely renovated. The lie rolled off her tongue effortlessly. She guided him into the living room. I refilled glasses at the bar. A woman in pearls glanced between Charles, me, and Victoria. Is this your father? Victoria's smile didn't falter. Oh no. This is Theodore, our caretaker. He helps around the house. Charles's jaw tightened. His hand gripped his champagne flute hard enough I thought it might shatter. Your caretaker, he repeated, voice carefully neutral. Yes. He's been with us for a few years now. Victoria turned to me, dismissive. Theodore, could you check on the appetizers? I retreated to the kitchen. Behind me, Victoria laughed, steering Charles toward other guests, launching into her pitch about her vision for the executive VP role. She had no idea whose side he was on. Dinner was called at 8. Guests took their seats, Victoria at the head, Charles at her right, as guest of honor Kenneth, across looking pale and anxious. I served the first course, seared scallops. Everyone complimented the food Victoria hadn't cooked. I moved around the table, refilling wine-clearing plates. Charles caught my eye once when I gave the smallest shake. Not yet. Patience. Victoria needed to feel safe, confident, triumphant. She needed to believe she'd won. Dessert was served. Port was poured. Victoria was mid-story about her latest deal when I caught Charles's attention and gave the slightest nod toward the kitchen. He understood. I set down my tray, untied my apron, walked into the kitchen. For the first time in 3 years, I wasn't Theodore the caretaker. I was Theodore Sterling, architect, builder, mentor. I adjusted my tie, smoothed my shirt, took a deep breath. When I walked back into that dining room, everything had changed. Not the room guests still laughing, still holding port glasses, but me. I stood differently, moved differently. I wasn't serving anymore. Charles Morrison saw me first. He set down his glass and rose slowly to his feet. One by one, the other guests noticed conversations trailing off. Victoria looked at Charles, confused. "Mr. Morrison, is something wrong?" Charles smiled. Not the polite professional smile he'd worn all evening. Something warmer, something real. Charles stood ready to introduce a legend. Victoria had no idea what was coming. The next 60 seconds would shatter everything. If you're still here, drop a 5 below. Quick note, this story includes fictional elements for dramatic impact. If that's not your thing, feel free to leave. Otherwise, let's watch Victoria's world collapse. Charles Morrison stood with his wine-glass voice carrying across the silent dining room. Before we go any further, I want to introduce everyone to a legend. He gestured toward me. This is Theodore Sterling, and what Victoria hasn't told you is that 25 years ago, this man gave me my first real chance in architecture when no other firm would. He's not a caretaker. He's one of the most brilliant architects of his generation. He designed the Harbor Towers, the Riverside Complex, and half the skyline you see from this very window. This house we're sitting in, he designed and built it 30 years ago, with his late wife Eleanor. Every head in the room turned toward me. The woman in pearls looked stricken. She'd asked earlier if I was Victoria's father, and accepted the caretaker lie without question. Victoria's face had gone white, but she recovered quickly, forcing a laugh. "Charles, I think there's been some confusion. Dad, you're embarrassing our guests." She turned to the table, smile brittle. "My father sometimes gets a little confused. I call him our caretaker as a term of endearment. He helps around the house and we love having him here." "A term of endearment," I said quietly. It was the first time I'd spoken at the dinner table in 3 years. Everyone went still. I pulled out my phone, the old iPhone I'd kept hidden, the one with all my recordings. I scrolled to the file from 6 months ago, when I'd overheard Victoria on the phone. I pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the room, crystal clear. "He's useful, honestly. Free childcare and he keeps the house spotless. The old man already signed all the papers over to me. Why wouldn't we keep him?" The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the blood draining from her face. Kenneth had gone rigid in his chair, staring at his plate like it might offer an escape route. Charles set down his wine glass very carefully. When he spoke, his voice was cold and professional. "Victoria, I think we need to have a serious conversation about ethics and integrity before we discuss the executive vice president position. Perhaps we should schedule that for another time, a much later time." The message was clear. She was out of consideration. The dinner party dissolved quickly after that. Guests made awkward excuses, thanked Victoria with forced politeness, and left. A few gave me sympathetic looks as they passed. The woman in pearls stopped and said quietly, "I'm so sorry. I should have known." Kenneth disappeared, probably to his man cave, with a bottle of expensive whiskey. Charles was the last to leave. He shook my hand at the door. "Mr. Theodore, if you need anything legal, support, a place to stay, anything, you call me." "Thank you, Charles. I mean it. You changed my life. It's time I return the favor." After he left, the house was silent. I stood in the foyer, still holding the phone with the recording. I'd won. Victoria's lies had been exposed in front of the one person whose opinion mattered most for her career. Charles Morrison would spread the word through the industry. Her reputation was destroyed. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. "You've destroyed me?" Victoria's scream echoed from the living room. I turned to find her standing there, mascara streaked down her face, shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've just done? That was my career, my future, everything I've worked for." "Everything you've worked for," I said quietly. "Or everything you've stolen. I gave you a home, I took care of you when Mom died. You made me your servant. You erased me from my own house. You tried to steal everything Eleanor and I built. It should have been mine," she shouted. "You were too grief-stricken to manage it. Someone had to take control." "So you did, with lies and manipulation, and... You want to talk about lies?" Victoria's voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. "Fine. Let's talk about consequences. If you continue down this path, if you keep fighting me, I will make sure you never see Jackson and Noah again." My blood went cold. "That's right." She smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "I'll take them across the country. California, maybe, or Oregon. Somewhere far away where you'll never find them. And I'll make sure they forget you ever existed, just like I erased you from these walls." I couldn't speak. The grandchildren were the one bright spot in the past 3 years. Jackson's drawings under my door. Noah's questions about architecture, teaching them both to appreciate the ocean view from the house I'd built. "You're using children as weapons," I said, voice barely steady. "I'm protecting my family from a bitter old man who's trying to destroy their mother." Victoria's tone turned calculating. "That's what I'll tell the court anyway. And who do you think they'll believe, the successful executive with young children to protect, or the elderly father with documented concerns about his mental state?" She turned and walked away, heels clicking on the marble floor. "Think about that before you make your next move, Dad." I stood alone in the foyer of the house I'd designed, victory ashes in my mouth. I'd exposed Victoria's lies, but she'd revealed her nuclear option, my grandchildren, and the threat of conservatorship dressed up as concern for her children's welfare. That night, I lay in my narrow attic bed, staring at the ceiling. Around midnight, I heard Victoria's voice through the thin wall. She was on the phone. "Yes, tomorrow, if possible. Conservatorship petition. I need the paperwork ready." Pause. "No, we move fast. He's getting legal advice, and I can't risk him protecting his assets. File in county court first thing Monday." Another pause. "The psychiatric evaluation, I'll handle it. I know a doctor who'll testify about his erratic behavior, his paranoia, his inability to manage his affairs. We'll have 3 witnesses who've seen him acting confused." I pressed the voice recorder app on my phone, capturing every word. "And the grandchildren." Victoria continued, voice ice cold. "If he fights back, I'll file for a restraining order, claim he's become unstable, a danger to them. By the time the dust settles, he'll be declared incompetent and banned from seeing his own grandchildren. Then everything will be mine. The house, the money, all of it." She hung up. I saved the recording and stared at the phone in the darkness. She'd lost the battle at dinner, but she was preparing for total war, and she was willing to use my grandchildren, innocent children, who loved their grandfather, as both weapon and shield. I thought about Patricia's warning, Victoria might accelerate. She wasn't just accelerating, she was going nuclear. And I had less than 48 hours to stop her. The papers arrived 3 days later. My daughter was petitioning the court to declare me mentally incompetent. This hearing would decide whether I kept control of my life or lost everything. I called Patricia the moment the process server left. She actually filed. "I know. I've been served too. They're requesting an emergency hearing. It's scheduled for next Tuesday. Manhattan County Court Judge Martha Brennan presiding." Patricia's voice was calm, but I heard the edge beneath it. "Theodore, she's moving fast. That means she's desperate. Good. Desperate people make mistakes. Over the next week, I watched Victoria prepare her case. She was thorough, I had to give her that. She staged photographs of my attic room clothes scattered on the floor, unwashed dishes on the nightstand, papers strewn everywhere. I came home from a walk one afternoon to find her photographer friend leaving camera in hand. She'd created evidence of my supposed deterioration. She coached Kenneth on his testimony. I overheard them in the living room. Just say he seems confused. Say he repeats himself. Say you're worried he can't manage basic tasks. And worst of all, she poisoned the grandchildren. I heard her talking to Jackson and Noah in soft, concerned tones. Grandpa is very sick. His mind isn't working right. He might need to go to a special place where doctors can help him. Jackson, only 7 years old, looked at me with frightened eyes the next morning. Grandpa, are you going away? I knelt down, hugged him tight. No, buddy. Grandpa's fine. But Victoria pulled him away. Come on, sweetie. Grandpa needs his rest. Tuesday morning, I dressed in my best suit, the charcoal gray one I'd worn to business meetings back when I ran my firm. Patricia met me at the courthouse steps. How are you feeling? She asked, like I'm about to fight for my life. Good, because you are. Judge Martha Brennan was in her early 60s, silver-haired with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She took her seat at the bench and reviewed the petition before looking up. This is a hearing on the petition filed by Victoria Sterling seeking conservatorship over her father, Theodore Sterling, on the grounds of mental incapacity. Mrs. Hayes, I see you're representing Mr. Sterling. Yes, Your Honor. Very well. We'll hear from the petitioner first. Victoria's lawyer was a sharp woman in an expensive suit, the kind who specialized in these cases. She stood and addressed the court with practiced sympathy. Your Honor, this is a heartbreaking situation. Victoria Sterling is a devoted daughter who has watched her father's mental decline with growing concern. After the death of his wife 3 years ago, Mr. Sterling has exhibited increasing signs of cognitive impairment, memory loss, and inability to manage his own affairs. Mrs. Sterling has been caring for him in her home, but his condition has deteriorated to the point where professional intervention is necessary. She presented the evidence, the staged photographs of my disorganized room, bank statements showing erratic withdrawals, the ones Victoria herself had made, testimony from Victoria's friends who'd witnessed my confusion at her book club. Then Victoria took the stand. She wore a pale blue dress, minimal makeup tissues clutched in her hand. The performance began immediately. Ms. Sterling, can you describe your father's condition? Victoria's voice trembled. He's not the man he used to be. After my mother died, he just broke. He forgets things constantly. Simple things like where he put his keys, what day it is. Last month, he left the stove on and nearly started a fire. I'm terrified something terrible will happen. A complete lie. There had been no fire, no incident, but she delivered it with such conviction that I saw the judge's expression soften slightly. He gets confused about people, Victoria continued, dabbing her eyes. Sometimes he forgets my children's names, his own grandchildren, and the paranoia he's convinced people are stealing from him, plotting against him. He's made wild accusations against me and my husband. Wild accusations, her lawyer repeated. Can you give an example? He claims I've stolen money from him, that I've taken over his house, that I'm trying to... She broke off, voice cracking. It breaks my heart. He's my father. I love him, but he needs help I can't give him anymore. Professional care, a conservator who can protect him from himself. It was masterful. Even knowing she was lying, even having lived through the truth, I could see how convincing she was. The grieving daughter overwhelmed by her father's decline, making the painful decision to seek legal help. The judge made notes, expression unreadable. Thank you, Ms. Sterling. Any other witnesses? Yes, Your Honor. Kenneth Sterling, the respondent's son-in-law. Kenneth walked to the stand like a man heading to the gallows. He wouldn't look at me. Mr. Sterling, you live with the respondent. Have you observed the behavior Ms. Sterling described? Kenneth swallowed. Yes. Theodore seems confused sometimes. He has trouble keeping track of things. Financial matters especially, he can't seem to manage the household accounts anymore. That's why Victoria had to take over. Another lie. Victoria had taken over because I'd foolishly signed the power of attorney, and she'd used it to steal $75,000. And in your opinion, does Mr. Theodore Sterling require a conservator? Kenneth's hands gripped the witness stand rail. For a moment, I thought he might tell the truth. His eyes flicked to me, then to Victoria, then down. Yes, he said quietly. I think he does. He left the stand without meeting my gaze. Victoria's lawyer stood confident. Your Honor, the evidence is clear, Mr. Sterling is no longer capable of managing his own affairs. For his safety and well-being, we request that the court grant conservatorship to his daughter Victoria Sterling. She sat down, a small smile playing at her lips. Kenneth was pale, but silent. Victoria wiped her eyes with a tissue, the picture of a heartbroken daughter. They thought they'd won. Patricia leaned close and whispered, "Ready?" I nodded. It was time to show them who I really was. The turning point came when Patricia called Dr. Rodriguez to the witness stand. And then Kenneth collapsed. What happened next would seal Victoria's fate forever. The defense calls Dr. Alan Rodriguez. Dr. Rodriguez took the stand with the calm authority of someone who'd testified in dozens of cases. Patricia established his credentials: neuropsychologist, 23 years of practice, over 5,000 cognitive evaluations, and then got to the point. Dr. Rodriguez, you evaluated Theodore Sterling 2 weeks ago. What were your findings? Mr. Sterling underwent a comprehensive neuropsychological assessment, Montreal Cognitive Assessment, memory testing, executive function, evaluation, and psychiatric screening. His results were exceptional. He scored in the 95th percentile for his age group, meaning he performed better than 95% of healthy individuals his age. I found no evidence of dementia, cognitive impairment, depression, or any condition that would affect his ability to manage his own affairs. Victoria's lawyer stood. Objection. One evaluation doesn't disprove a pattern of decline. Your Honor, Patricia said smoothly. I have Dr. Rodriguez's complete report here, including brain imaging that shows no abnormalities. I also have testimony from Mr. Sterling's previous physician confirming his excellent health over the past 3 years. But perhaps more importantly, I have evidence that directly contradicts the petitioner's claims. She pulled out her phone, connected it to the courtroom's audio system. This is a recording made by Mr. Sterling 1 week ago. Your Honor, I believe it speaks for itself. She pressed play. Victoria's voice filled the courtroom, cold and calculating. Yes, tomorrow, if possible. Conservatorship petition. I need the paperwork ready. No, we move fast. He's getting legal advice, and I can't risk him protecting his assets. The psychiatric evaluation, I'll handle it. I know a doctor who'll testify about his erratic behavior. We'll have 3 witnesses who've seen him acting confused. And the grandchildren, if he fights back, I'll file for a restraining order. By the time the dust settles, he'll be declared incompetent and banned from seeing his own grandchildren. Then everything will be mine. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria had gone white. Her lawyer was frantically scribbling notes. Kenneth looked like he might be sick. Judge Brennan's expression had hardened into something cold and unforgiving. She turned to me. Mr. Sterling, I'd like to hear from you directly. Do you understand what's happening in this courtroom? I stood. Yes, Your Honor. My daughter is attempting to have me declared mentally incompetent, so she can seize control of my assets. She needs the money because her husband Kenneth owes $1.5 million to a loan shark named Frankie. She's already stolen over $75,000 from my accounts, without my knowledge, to pay down his gambling debt. When that wasn't enough, she decided to take everything. That's not true, Victoria shouted, but her lawyer put a hand on her arm. I continued, voice steady. I have bank statements showing the withdrawals. I have recordings of Victoria planning this conservatorship petition. I have photographs proving she staged the evidence of my supposed deterioration. And I have a medical evaluation proving I'm of completely sound mind. Judge Brennan nodded slowly. Ms. Hayes, do you have documentation of the financial? Your Honor. Kenneth stood abruptly, his voice breaking. Your Honor, I need to say something. Everyone turned to look at him. Victoria grabbed his arm, hissing, Kenneth, sit down. He pulled away. No, I can't do this anymore. He looked at the judge, then at me. Theodore is completely competent. There's nothing wrong with him. Victoria made me lie. She told me what to say on the stand. She threatened me, said if I didn't help her, she'd leave me and I'd be alone with the loan sharks. Kenneth. Victoria's voice was sharp with panic. I'm sorry, Theodore, he said, and he was crying now. I'm so sorry. You were right about everything. The gambling, the debt, Victoria stealing your money. It's all true. And you're not confused or forgetful. You're sharper than I'll ever be. Judge Brennan held up a hand. Mr. Sterling Kenneth. Sterling, are you saying you committed perjury in this court? Yes, Your Honor. I lied. Victoria told me to. The judge looked at Victoria, whose face had gone from white to red. Ms. Sterling, I've heard enough. This petition is denied. Furthermore, I'm ordering an immediate investigation into elder abuse and financial exploitation. Mr. Theodore Sterling, this court finds you to be of sound mind and fully capable of managing your own affairs. She turned to Victoria. Miss Sterling, I'm issuing a temporary order requiring you to vacate Mr. Sterling's property within 72 hours. You are not to remove any items except personal belongings. You are not to access his financial accounts. A full accounting of all transactions will be provided to the district attorney's office for review. Victoria stood shaking. This is insane. You're believing lies. Ms. Sterling, I suggest you speak with your attorney before you say anything else that might incriminate you further. We're adjourned. The gavel came down. Victoria grabbed Jackson and Noah, who'd been waiting in the hallway with a nanny. She didn't look at me as she pushed past the boys, confused and frightened. Mom, what's happening? Jackson asked. We're leaving, now. At the courthouse steps, she finally turned back. Her makeup was ruined, her expensive suit wrinkled. You won, Dad. Congratulations. I hope you're happy in that house, because you're going to die alone in it. She loaded the boys into her car and drove away. I stood there on the courthouse steps in my charcoal gray suit, watching the car disappear down the street. Patricia stood beside me. You won, she said quietly. Yeah. Theodore, you got your house back. Your assets are protected. Victoria's lies are exposed. I know. Then why do you look like you just lost? I thought about Jackson's frightened eyes, about Noah asking what was happening, about 2 7-year-old boys being torn away from their grandfather because their mother had chosen greed over love. That evening I walked through the empty house. Victoria and Kenneth had cleared out their things in a rush, leaving closet doors open and drawers half emptied. The master bedroom was mine again. The office was mine. The wine cellar, the living room, the garden, all of it mine. I stood in Eleanor's reading nook, looking at the empty space where her velvet chair used to be, Patricia had gotten it back from storage, and it would be returned tomorrow. I'd won. I'd reclaimed my house, exposed Victoria's lies, protected my assets, regained my dignity. So why did the victory feel so hollow? I remembered something Eleanor had said years ago after a particularly bitter business negotiation where I'd crushed a competitor. "What's the point of winning?" she'd asked gently, "if we lose what matters most in the process." I'd thought she was being too soft. Now, standing alone in the house I'd designed with her, I understood. But maybe I'd underestimated something. Maybe I'd forgotten one of Eleanor's other lessons: people always remember how you treated them. And children especially remember the truth. Jackson and Noah were young, but they weren't blind. And someday, they'd be old enough to ask questions. Old enough to understand. I just had to be patient and hope it wasn't too late. The judge ruled in Theodore's favor. He'd won his house and freedom. But watching Victoria drive away with his grandsons, he realized winning the battle didn't mean winning what mattered most. Still here, comment boundaries below. This narrative uses creative storytelling fictionalized for depth. Stay to see Theodore fight for his grandson's love. I'd underestimated one thing: people always remember how you treated them. 3 weeks after Victoria took my grandsons away, my network began to activate. And we prepared for a new kind of battle. The first call came from Charles Morrison. "Mr. Theodore, I heard what happened in court. I'm so sorry about your grandchildren. How can I help?" "Charles, you've already done more than enough, testifying at the conservatorship hearing." "That was nothing. That was the truth. But I'm serious. What do you need?" I sat in Eleanor's reading nook, her velvet chair finally returned from storage. "Honestly, I don't know yet. Patricia is working on a legal strategy to get visitation rights, but beyond that..." "What about work?" I blinked. Work. Morrison Development is breaking ground on a mixed-use complex in Brooklyn next spring. Residential towers, retail, public spaces. It's the biggest project we've ever taken on, and I need a strategic advisor. Someone who understands how to design spaces where lives can flourish. He paused. "The position pays $200,000 a year part-time. I need your expertise, Mr. Theodore. This isn't charity. This is business." My throat tightened. For 3 years, I'd been treated as incompetent, useless, a burden, and Charles was offering me meaningful work. Respect. "I accept," I said quietly. "When do I start?" "Next Monday." "Welcome back, Mr. Theodore." Patricia called that afternoon with her own news. "I'm filing a petition for grandparent visitation rights, under New York law. If you can demonstrate a substantial existing relationship with the children and show that visitation is in their best interest, the court can grant it even over a parent's objection." "Can we win?" "You've been a consistent presence in Jackson and Noah's lives for 7 years. You lived with them, cared for them, formed bonds. The conservatorship hearing proved Victoria was manipulative and dishonest." "Yes, Theodore. I think we can win. The hearing is scheduled for 2 weeks from today." 2 weeks. 14 days to build a case that would bring my grandsons back into my life. That evening, James Sullivan called with his report. "Found her. She's renting a 2-bedroom condo in Jersey City. Been there 3 weeks. Neighbors say she keeps to herself. Kenneth's still with her, but he looks rough, drinking heavily from what I can tell. And Theodore. She's in financial trouble. Maxed out 2 credit cards already. No job prospects. Word's gotten around about the conservatorship case." "How much trouble?" "Enough that she's going to be desperate soon." Desperate people make mistakes. I filed that information away. The next day, Daniel Foster showed up at my door. We'd worked together 30 years ago before I started my own firm. He'd gone on to design museums and cultural centers, won awards I'd only dreamed of. "Theodore," he said, pulling me into a hug. "The architecture community has been looking for you. We thought you'd retired to Florida or something. Long story. I heard parts of it. Your daughter. He shook his head. I'm sorry. But listen, there's a reason I'm here. The Architecture Institute wants to honor you with the Lifetime Achievement Award at the Spring Gala. They've been trying to reach you for months. I stared at him. The Lifetime Achievement Award. You designed some of the most iconic buildings on the East Coast. You mentored a generation of architects, including Charles Morrison. The Harbor Towers project changed how we think about residential design. Theodore, you didn't just build buildings. You built a legacy, and we haven't forgotten. Diaz, after he left, I stood in the foyer of the house I'd designed, looking at the curved staircase, the custom millwork, the windows that framed the ocean view. Victoria had tried to erase me from this house, from my own history. She'd isolated me, made me invisible. But she couldn't erase 40 years of work. She couldn't erase the respect I'd earned, the relationships I'd built, the reputation I'd spent a lifetime creating. Charles was giving me work. Patricia was fighting for my rights. James was gathering intelligence. Daniel was restoring my professional legacy. And somewhere buried beneath Victoria's lies and manipulation, 2 7-year-old boys remembered their grandfather who taught them to appreciate beautiful things. I wasn't fighting alone anymore. Victoria had isolated me once. She'd weaponized my grief, turned my trust against me, tried to steal everything I'd built with Eleanor. She would never get that chance again. In 2 weeks, we'd face each other in court. This time, the battle wasn't about money or houses or conservatorships. It was about Jackson and Noah, about giving them back their grandfather, about proving that love and integrity matter more than manipulation and lies. And this time, I wasn't just going to win. I was going to make sure my grandsons knew the truth about who their mother was and who I'd always been. 2 weeks later, I sat across from Victoria in a New Jersey courtroom. This time, I wasn't defending myself. I was fighting for my grandsons. Judge Raymond Torres was younger than Judge Brennan, perhaps, in his early 50s, with kind eyes that suggested he'd seen too many families torn apart by spite. He reviewed the petition, then looked at Patricia. Ms. Hayes, you're seeking visitation rights for your client, Mr. Sterling, with his grandsons Jackson and Noah. Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling maintained a consistent, loving relationship with his grandchildren for 7 years, until his daughter abruptly severed all contact 3 months ago. This wasn't done for the children's benefit. It was done to punish Mr. Sterling after he successfully defended himself against Miss Sterling's fraudulent conservatorship petition. Victoria's lawyer stood. Your Honor, Ms. Sterling is simply protecting her children from a hostile environment. Her father sued her, humiliated her publicly in court, and has shown nothing but anger and vindictiveness. She can't expose her young sons to that kind of hatred. Judge Torres turned to Victoria. Ms. Sterling, can you explain why you believe your father poses a danger to your children? Victoria's voice was steady, practiced. He's changed, Your Honor. After the conservatorship hearing, he became bitter, angry. I'm afraid of what he might say to my boys, how he might turn them against me. I'm their mother. I have to protect them. Patricia stood. Your Honor, may I present evidence? She laid out bank statements showing the $400,000 Victoria had stolen. She presented James Sullivan's report, documenting Victoria's maxed-out credit cards and mounting debts. She showed the court that Victoria hadn't moved to New Jersey for her children's benefit. She'd fled to escape legal consequences. This isn't about protecting children, Patricia said. This is parental alienation. Miss Sterling is using her sons as weapons to punish their grandfather for refusing to be victimized by her financial exploitation. That's not true. Victoria's composure cracked. I'm doing what's best for my children. Then why? Patricia asked calmly, did you tell Jackson and Noah that their grandfather was dangerous, that he was sick and needed to be sent away? Victoria went pale. They needed to understand. You poisoned their perception of a man who loved them unconditionally for 7 years. Judge Torres held up a hand. Ms. Hayes, do you have additional witnesses? Yes, Your Honor, Kenneth Sterling. Kenneth walked to the stand, looking different from the last time I'd seen him. Sober, clear-eyed. He'd lost weight, and there was something resolved in his posture. Mr. Sterling, you're the children's father and Miss Sterling's husband. What's your testimony regarding Mr. Theodore Sterling's relationship with his grandchildren? Kenneth didn't hesitate. Theodore is an excellent grandfather. He was patient, kind, always present. He taught the boys about architecture, took them to the beach, read to them every night. They adored him. He looked at Victoria, then away. My wife used the children as bargaining chips. When Theodore won the conservatorship case, she told Jackson and Noah that their grandfather was dangerous, that he was sick, that they couldn't see him anymore. It was a lie. All of it. Why are you testifying against your wife? The judge asked. Because I've lied enough. Kenneth's voice was quiet. And because those boys deserve their grandfather. Victoria was rigid in her chair, staring straight ahead. Patricia presented one final piece of evidence, letters and drawings the boys had made. The judge examined them silently. One drawing showed a house by the ocean with 3 stick figures labeled me, Noah, and Grandpa. Jackson had written in careful 7-year-old handwriting, I miss Grandpa. Why can't I see him anymore? Judge Torres set down the papers. I've heard enough. Ms. Sterling, your testimony that your father is dangerous or vindictive is not supported by any evidence. In fact, the evidence suggests you've engaged in parental alienation to punish him for protecting his assets from your financial exploitation. He turned to me. Mr. Sterling, the court grants you visitation rights. 2 afternoons per week and alternating holidays. First visit will be supervised, subsequent visits at your discretion. These children deserve to maintain a relationship with their grandfather. The gavel came down. Victoria didn't look at me as we filed out of the courtroom. In the hallway, she grabbed my arm, her grip tight. They'll hate you, she hissed. You think you've won, but I'll make sure they know what you did to me. They'll hate you for destroying their mother. I looked at her, this stranger, who used to be my daughter, and felt nothing but pity. Yet then I'll spend every visit showing them the truth, I said quietly. That I love them, that I've always loved them. And that love isn't about control or manipulation. It's about showing up, being present, and letting them decide for themselves. She had nothing to say to that. 2 afternoons a week. Alternating holidays. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. The first visit was scheduled for Saturday. 3 long months since I'd seen Jackson and Noah. 3 months of wondering if they'd forgotten me, if Victoria's poison had worked. When I walked into the supervised visitation center that Saturday afternoon and saw 2 7-year-old boys running toward me shouting, Grandpa, I realized that some bonds are stronger than lies. It felt like meeting them all over again. And this time, I wasn't going to let anyone take them away. The first afternoon with Jackson and Noah after 3 months felt like getting to know them all over again. Victoria had tried to change them, but I was learning that love is stronger than lies. Victoria's car pulled up at 2 o'clock. She didn't get out, just waited as the boys climbed from the back seat. They walked toward the door, hesitantly looking back at their mother. She rolled down the window. Boys, if you need anything, call me right away. As if I was a threat, as if their own grandfather might hurt them. Noah, always the gentler one, turned back. Mom, Grandpa is nice. It's okay. Victoria drove away without looking at me. Inside, the boys stood in the foyer, the same foyer where they used to run and play, where Jackson had practiced sliding in his socks on the marble floor. Now they were uncertain, polite strangers. "Are you guys hungry?" I asked. "I made cookies." "Mom said we're only here for 3 hours," Jackson said. Not rude, just stating a fact. "That's right. 3 hours every Tuesday and Thursday. Is that okay with you?" "Why couldn't we see you anymore?" Noah asked quietly. "Did we do something wrong?" My heart broke. "No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. Your mom and I had some grown-up disagreements, but my love for you never changed. Not for 1 second." Jackson looked at his brother, then at me. "Mom said you were angry, that you were sick." I knelt down to their level. "I was sad for a while when Grandma Eleanor died, and your mom and I did have an argument, but I'm not sick and I'm not angry at you. I missed you both so much." "We missed you too," Noah said, and suddenly he was hugging me, and then Jackson was too, and I held them both, trying not to cry. "Come on," I said after a moment. "I want to show you something." I led them upstairs to the guest room, the one that used to be my prison when it was the attic space. I'd converted it back into something better, a room for them. Bunk beds with navy blue comforters, a bookshelf filled with their favorite stories, a box of Legos, 2 small desks by the window. "This is your room," I said, "for when you're here." Jackson's eyes went wide. "Really, we can come here every week?" "Every week, I promise." They spent 20 minutes just exploring, deciding who got the top bunk, pulling out books, arguing good-naturedly about where to put the Lego castle they immediately started building. Then Noah noticed the blueprints on my desk. "Grandpa, what are you drawing?" I showed them the plans for Morrison Development's Brooklyn project towers and public spaces, carefully measured and sketched. "I'm working again, helping design buildings." "Can we help?" Jackson asked. So we spent the next 2 hours drawing together. I gave them graph paper, and pencils showed them how to sketch a simple floor plan, how to think about where windows should go, how to design a room that felt welcoming. They drew houses with crooked lines and impossible proportions, and I praised every single one. When Victoria's car pulled up at 5 o'clock, Noah looked at me. "Do we have to go?" "For now, but you'll be back on Thursday." "Promise. Promise." They hugged me goodbye, real hugs, not the hesitant ones from earlier, and ran to the car. That night my phone buzzed, a text from Victoria's number. "Today was so fun. Can we really come back next week, Jackson?" He'd snuck his mother's phone. I typed back, "Absolutely. Every week, I promise." "Good. We missed you." I sat in Eleanor's reading nook, her photo on the side table, and let myself feel something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. The healing would take time. Victoria's poison hadn't completely worn off. The boys were still cautious, still caught between their mother's lies and their own memories of who I'd always been. But today, they'd chosen to believe in me. They'd chosen to draw pictures and build Legos and ask if they could come back. And that was enough. For now, it was enough. 6 weeks after that first visit, I stood backstage at the National Architecture Awards. 500 industry leaders filled the ballroom, ready to honor my career. And in the front row, the 2 most important people were waiting. Daniel Foster found me adjusting my bow tie. Nervous, terrified. I admitted. He smiled. "Don't be. Everyone out there has been waiting for you to come back. You belong here, Theodore. You always did." Then I heard a familiar voice. "Mr. Sterling." I turned. Kenneth stood there looking healthier than I'd seen him in years, sober, clear-eyed, wearing a suit that actually fit. And beside him, in matching navy suits, with tiny bow ties, were Jackson and Noah. How did you?" The boys wanted to see their grandpa get honored, Kenneth said quietly. They asked if they could come. I figured, well, Victoria doesn't know we're here. She thinks they're at a friend's birthday party. Jackson ran forward and hugged me. Grandpa, you look fancy. So do you, buddy. I looked at Kenneth. Thank you. It's the least I could do. He squeezed my shoulder. You deserve this. All of it. The ceremony began. I watched from backstage as awards were presented: Young Architect of the Year, Sustainable Design, Innovative Residential Spaces. And then Charles Morrison walked to the podium. The Lifetime Achievement Award. He began, recognizes an architect whose work has fundamentally shaped our profession and our communities. This year's recipient designed some of the most iconic structures on the East Coast: the Harbor Towers, the Riverside Complex, dozens of private residences that set new standards for how we think about space and light and the way buildings can enhance human lives. He paused, looking out at the audience. But beyond his designs, this man shaped people. He mentored a generation of architects, including me, 25 years ago, when I was a kid, fresh out of Columbia, with no connections and no prospects. Theodore Sterling gave me my first real chance. He taught me that architecture isn't just about structures, it's about legacy, about creating spaces where lives can flourish. My throat was tight. For years we lost track of him, Charles continued. Tonight we welcome him back. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lifetime Achievement Award goes to Theodore Sterling. The room erupted. 500 people rose to their feet, applauding. I walked onto that stage, the same stage where I'd once presented my Harbor Towers design 30 years ago, and accepted the Crystal Award from Charles. The applause continued. I looked out at the crowd, at familiar faces I hadn't seen in years, at young architects who probably only knew my name from textbooks. And in the front row, Jackson and Noah were clapping so hard, their little hands must have hurt. Thank you, I said into the microphone. The room quieted. I once thought my story was over. 3 years ago, I lost my wife, Eleanor. And for a while after that, I lost myself too. I forgot who I was. I let other people define me, diminish me, convince me that I had nothing left to offer. I looked directly at my grandsons, but I learned something. Legacy isn't what you build with your hands. It's what you leave in people's hearts. It's the way you treat others when no one's watching. It's choosing kindness over cruelty, truth over lies, integrity over convenience. The room was silent now, listening. To every young architect here tonight, don't let anyone make you forget who you are. Your worth isn't determined by your last project or your current circumstance. It's determined by how you treat people, how you stand up for what's right, and whether you remember that our work is about serving something larger than ourselves. I held up the award. This belongs to everyone who believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself. Thank you. The standing ovation lasted 3 full minutes. Afterward, as we left the ceremony, Jackson held my hand. The street was lit with city lights, and his little bow tie was already crooked. Grandpa, he said, looking up at me with wide eyes, when I grow up, I want people to clap for me like that. I knelt down, straightening his tie. Then be honest, be kind, and be yourself. The applause will come. Promise, promise. 3 days later, the photo appeared in Architectural Digest. Me in my tuxedo holding the Crystal Award with Jackson on my left and Noah on my right, all 3 of us smiling. The caption read, Theodore Sterling, flanked by his grandsons, accepts the Lifetime Achievement Award after years away from the public eye. The magazine was sent to every major architecture firm in the country, including, I knew, Victoria's mailbox, The photo appeared in Architectural Digest 3 days after the ceremony. Me in my tuxedo holding the Crystal Award with Jackson and Noah on either side. That afternoon, Victoria showed up at my door. I was reviewing blueprints for the Brooklyn project when the doorbell rang. Through the window, I saw her car in the driveway. No scheduled visit today. No court date. No reason for her to be here. But there she was, standing on the porch in jeans and a sweater, instead of her usual designer clothes. She looked smaller, tired. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. She walked through the foyer, slowly taking in the changes. I'd spent months restoring what she'd erased. Eleanor's family photographs lined the hallway. The abstract art was gone, replaced by watercolors Eleanor and I had collected. Eleanor's velvet chair sat by the bay window. Her vintage books on the mantel. The brass telescope from Maine. The framed sketches from my early projects. "You changed everything back," Victoria said, touching a family photo on the wall. I restored it. There's a difference. Changing implies it was wrong before. I simply brought back what belonged here. She turned and I saw something I hadn't seen in years: vulnerability, fear. I saw the photo, you and the boys at the awards ceremony. Kenneth brought them. They wanted to be there. I know. She sank onto the sofa, the same sofa where she'd once entertained friends, while I served tea like a ghost. I'm not here to fight. I'm here because I'm desperate. I remained standing, waiting. I'm broke. The rent's 2 months overdue. Eviction notice came last week. I'm behind on utilities, credit cards, the boys' tuition. My car payment is late. Kenneth's drinking again and not contributing. I've applied to 20 firms. No one will hire me. Word got around about the conservatorship case. I felt no satisfaction, just sadness. The boys ask questions I can't answer," she continued. "Why can't we afford new clothes? Why did we leave the big house? They're 7, and they're learning what it means to be broke." "What did you expect, Victoria?" "I don't know." Her voice cracked. "I thought I could control it. Kenneth's debt, everything. I thought I was protecting my family. Now I can't feed my children without the food pantry." She looked up, eyes red. "I need help, Dad. Not for me, for Jackson and Noah. They need stability, a place to live, some sense the world isn't falling apart." There it was. Not apology. Not amends. Just money. I sat in Eleanor's chair, feeling every one of my 60 years. No. "Dad, please. I won't give you money to continue the lifestyle that got you here. I won't enable the patterns that led you to steal from me, manipulate me, try to have me declared incompetent. That's not fair. But I'll help differently. I'll pay for therapy. Real therapy with a professional who specializes in family dynamics, someone who can help you understand why you made these choices." Victoria wiped her eyes. "I don't need therapy. I made mistakes, but I'm not broken. I just need help getting back on my feet. 3 months of rent, maybe $5,000 for expenses. And then what? 6 months from now, you'll be back in the same position because you haven't dealt with the underlying problems. The underlying problem is, I don't have enough money. The underlying problem is that you spent 3 years viewing me as an asset to exploit rather than a father to love, that you taught your children to see their grandfather as a servant, that you were willing to destroy me legally and financially to get what you wanted. Money won't fix that. Only you can by doing the hard work." She grabbed her purse, hands shaking. "So you're letting your grandchildren suffer because you're angry. I see Jackson and Noah twice a week, every other holiday. I know they're fed, clothed, and safe. If they weren't, Patricia Hayes would have emergency custody papers filed in 24 hours. I stood. You're not using them as leverage anymore. That doesn't work. I love those boys, and that's why I won't give you money that teaches them the wrong lessons about consequences. She stared at me, and I watched the calculation behind her eyes, searching for another angle. Then I saw the moment she realized she had nothing. No house to threaten, no assets to steal, no legal avenue left. Just herself and the consequences she'd been running from. "I'm your daughter," she said, voice breaking. "I know. That's why I offered therapy. That's why the door isn't completely closed. But you have to choose to walk through it. You have to do the work. I can't do it for you." She walked toward the door, paused with her hand on the handle. "The boys ask about you constantly, every day. When do we see Grandpa? Can we go to Grandpa's house? They talk about the blueprints you show them, the stories you tell." She turned. "I think they love you more than they love me." My heart broke for her then. Not with pity, but with the deep ache of seeing your child lost and not knowing how to bring them home. "That's not true, Victoria. Children don't have finite love to distribute. They just want people who are honest, who show up and mean what they say, who love them without conditions. Like you did. Like I'm trying to do now. Like I wish I'd done better when you were young. Maybe if your mother and I had set better boundaries, been more present instead of focused on the business." I trailed off. "But I can't change the past. I can only try to do better now. And right now, that means not enabling your destructive patterns." She opened the door. Cool autumn air swept in, carrying salt from the ocean. "The therapy offer stands," I said. "Whenever you're ready." She walked to her car without answering, got in, and drove away. I stood in the doorway watching until her taillights disappeared the same driveway where I'd watched her leave months ago, screaming that I'd die alone. But this time felt different. Final. No anger, no triumph, just quiet acceptance. She'd had every chance to choose truth over lies, family over greed, growth over stagnation. She'd chosen herself. At the conservatorship hearing, at the visitation hearing, and now when I'd offered real help and she'd asked for cash instead. I closed the door and walked through the house I'd reclaimed. In the evening light, Eleanor's photographs glowed softly. The chair she'd given me sat waiting. The house felt like itself again, like home. I'd done everything I could. Set boundaries, offered real help, protected the grandchildren without weaponizing them. Victoria had made her choice. Now we'd both have to live with it. 6 months would pass before I heard from her again. 6 months after Victoria's desperate visit, I stood on the balcony watching the sunrise paint the ocean gold and pink. The house was quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the kind of silence that comes from contentment, rather than loneliness. And then, on the 6th anniversary of Eleanor's death, a letter arrived. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about those 6 months first. My life had found a rhythm again, not the old rhythm from before Eleanor died, but something new and surprisingly good. I consulted for Morrison Development 3 days a week, reviewing plans for the Brooklyn project, and mentoring the younger architects on Charles's team. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, I taught a seminar at Columbia's architecture school, Designing for Human Flourishing. 22 eager students who reminded me why I'd fallen in love with this profession 40 years ago. The house wasn't a prison anymore. It was a home. I'd hired someone to help with the heavy cleaning, but mostly I took care of it myself. Cooking breakfast in the kitchen, where I'd once served Victoria's dinner parties, reading in Eleanor's chair by the window, working at my desk with the ocean view she'd insisted we design the house around, so you can always see the horizon, she'd said when we were planning this place. So you never forget there's something bigger than whatever problem you're facing. I understood what she meant now. Jackson and Noah's room stayed ready for them. Bunk beds made up with fresh sheets. Art supplies in the closet. The Lego castle they'd started months ago, grown now into an elaborate city that sprawled across the floor. Every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon, the house filled with their voices, arguments about whose turn it was to build the next tower, questions about how bridges work, laughter when I let them beat me at cards. Kenneth picked them up on Friday evenings for his weekends. He'd been sober for a year now, working as a project manager at a construction firm. He looked different, clearer, steadier. We'd worked out a 50-50 custody arrangement that seemed to be working. The boys needed their father, and Kenneth was finally becoming the father they needed. "Thank you," he'd said last month, standing in my driveway after dropping off the boys, "for not giving up on them. On me." "You did the hard work yourself," I'd told him. "I just kept the door open." Victoria was still in the New Jersey apartment, struggling financially but managing. She'd found work as an administrative assistant at a small firm, nothing like the executive position she'd dreamed of, but it paid the bills. She hadn't taken me up on the therapy offer. Our communication was minimal, limited to the necessary logistics of the boys' schedules. Terse texts about pickup times and school events. We weren't enemies anymore, but we weren't family either. We were just two people bound by our love for the same children, navigating a careful distance. I'd made peace with that. Some bridges burn too thoroughly to rebuild. Some relationships end not with dramatic closure, but with a quiet, permanent separation. I'd done what I could. The rest was up to her. And then the letter came. It arrived on October 15th, exactly 6 years after Eleanor's death. I'd spent the morning at her grave, bringing fresh flowers and sitting on the bench nearby, telling her about Jackson's newfound interest in engineering and Noah's artistic talent, about the award ceremony, about the life I was building without her. The envelope was waiting on my doorstep when I got home, my name and address in handwriting. I recognized Victoria's careful script, the same penmanship she'd learned in 3rd grade when Eleanor had insisted she practice daily. I sat in Eleanor's chair and opened it. "Dear Dad, I've written this letter 17 times. Each version starts with excuses, explanations, reasons why I did what I did. But the truth is simpler and harder than any explanation. I was wrong. Completely, devastatingly wrong. I destroyed everything good in my life because of greed, because I was too proud to ask for help, because I was too afraid to admit I'd made mistakes. I treated you like an asset instead of my father. I taught my children to disrespect you. I tried to steal the house you and Mom built together. I almost succeeded in having you declared incompetent, when you're one of the sharpest, kindest people I've ever known. There's no fixing what I did. I know that. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness or money or anything else. I'm writing because today is the anniversary of Mom's death, and I've been thinking about her all day. About how she loved you, about how she taught me to value people over possessions, about how disappointed she'd be in the person I became. I miss her. I miss who I used to be before I let fear and greed turn me into someone I don't recognize. I miss my father. I don't expect a response. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I understand now what I couldn't see before. You were right about everything. Victoria, I read it 3 times. The first time I felt anger, all the old fury at what she'd done, what she'd tried to do, the years she'd stolen. The second time I felt sadness so deep it was hard to breathe. My daughter, my only child, so lost. The third time I felt something unexpected, a tiny, fragile glimmer of hope. I called Patricia. She sent a letter, an apology. What do you want to do? I don't know. Part of me wants to throw it away. Part of me wants to believe people can change. They can, Patricia said carefully. But they have to do the work. and you have to protect yourself while they do. That evening, I wrote back. Just a few lines on my own stationery. Victoria, I received your letter. Thank you for writing it. I can't forget what happened. I won't pretend the past 3 years didn't happen, or that trust can be rebuilt overnight. But I'm willing to watch your actions and see if they match your words. That's all I can offer right now. Dad. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Victoria's number. I won't disappoint you this time. I promise. I stared at those words for a long time. She'd made promises before, so many promises. But people can change, can't they? They can wake up one day and finally see what they've been too blind or too afraid to see. They can choose differently. 3 months later, Victoria sent another text. Can we meet not at court? Not with lawyers. Just coffee. Just us. I need to tell you something. I stood on the balcony again, watching the winter sun set over the ocean, Eleanor's words echoing in my mind. Always see the horizon. Never forget there's something bigger than whatever problem you're facing. And I typed back, okay. When? We met at a small cafe in Manhattan. Not the kind of place she would have chosen before no Michelin stars. No celebrity chef, just honest coffee and pastries in a neighborhood spot with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. It was the first real conversation we'd had in over 3 years. I arrived 10 minutes early and chose a table by the window. My hands were steadier than I'd expected, but my heart was racing. Patricia had offered to come with me to wait nearby in case I needed support. I declined. This was something I needed to do alone. Victoria walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. I almost didn't recognize her. The woman who approached my table bore little resemblance to the polished executive who'd hosted dinner parties and manipulated boardrooms. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore jeans and a navy sweater, no jewelry, except the watch Kenneth had given her years ago. No designer handbag, no expensive shoes. Her face was bare of the careful makeup she used to apply like armor. She looked younger somehow, and terrified. Hi, Dad. Her voice was quiet. Victoria, please sit. We ordered coffee. Neither of us touched the menus. The silence stretched between us, not hostile, but fragile, like we were handling something that might shatter if we moved too quickly. Thank you for meeting me, she finally said. I wasn't sure you would. I wasn't sure I would either. She nodded, staring at her coffee cup. I don't know where to start. The letter was a start. It took me 17 tries to write it. Every version before that was full of excuses. Blaming Kenneth's gambling, blaming the financial pressure, blaming you for not helping me when I needed it. She looked up, meeting my eyes. But none of that was true. Or if it was true, it wasn't the real truth. What's the real truth? She took a breath. I've been in therapy twice a week for the past 6 months. Did you know that? I felt something shift in my chest. No, I didn't. After you refused to give me money last time after I left your house, I had this moment where I realized I had nothing left. No job, no savings, no relationship with my father, barely any relationship with my children. And I was still blaming everyone else. You, Kenneth, Charles Morrison, the entire architecture community, everyone but me. She pulled out a tissue, not crying yet, but preparing. My therapist asked me this question. If everyone in your life is the problem, what's the common denominator? And I hated her for it. I wanted to walk out. But she was right. The common denominator was me. What made you finally go? I asked. Jackson asked me something. He said, Mom, why doesn't Grandpa visit us? Why do we always have to go to his house? And I started to tell him it was your fault that you were being stubborn and mean. But Noah, her voice broke. Noah looked at me with those big, serious eyes and said, That doesn't sound like Grandpa. I felt my own eyes burning. My 7-year-old son called me on my lie, and I realized they knew. They'd always known. I was the problem, not you, so I called the number you'd given me, the therapist you offered to pay for. I couldn't afford it myself, but she has a sliding scale program, $60 a session. I could manage that. What are you learning? I asked carefully. That I'm terrified of being ordinary. That watching you and Mom build this incredible legacy made me feel like I had to be equally exceptional or I was worthless. That I measured love in terms of what people could do for me instead of who they were. That I inherited Dad's ambition, but not his integrity. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that didn't matter, as long as I was successful. She reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. Her hands were shaking as she slid it across the table. What's this, Open it. I did. Inside was a check for $30,000 made out to me, signed in her careful handwriting. I stared at it, not understanding. I can't repay all of it at once, Victoria said quickly. The $400,000 I took from your accounts. But I can start. I've been working double shifts weekends every extra hour I can get. I'm paying down my debts first, the ones that could get us evicted or shut off our utilities. But I'm putting aside money for this too. It'll take years, maybe 5 or 6, but I'm going to repay every cent. Victoria, I know you don't need it. That's not the point. Her voice was firm, now stronger. I need to do this. Not because it'll erase what I did. Not because it'll make us even. But because I need to prove to myself that I can do something hard, something that takes years, something that requires discipline and sacrifice. I need to be the kind of person who pays her debts, not just financial ones. I looked at the check, then at my daughter. You're really doing the work. I'm trying. Some days I hate it. Some days I want to quit therapy and go back to blaming everyone else because that's easier. But I keep showing up. Because... She wiped her eyes. Because I want my sons to have a mother they can be proud of. And I want to be able to look at myself in the mirror without seeing the person who tried to steal her own father's house. We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe hummed with other people's conversations, the hiss of the espresso machine, ordinary life happening around us, while we navigated this extraordinary moment. I'm not ready for family dinners at the house, I said carefully. I'm not ready to pretend the last 3 years didn't happen, or that trust rebuilds overnight. I know. But I appreciate this. The therapy, the check, this conversation. I appreciate that you're trying. Is that enough for now? I thought about Eleanor, about what she would say, about the boys and the life I'd built, and the boundaries that had saved me, about the fact that people can change, but change is a process, not an event. For now, I said, it's enough. Victoria's face crumpled. She covered it with her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs she'd been holding back for months, maybe years. I reached across the table and put my hand on her arm. Not a hug, not absolution. Just contact. Connection. A bridge beginning to form across the canyon we'd created. When she finally looked up, mascara-free tears streaking her face, I said something I hadn't said in over a year. I'm proud of you for trying, Victoria. That takes courage. She nodded, unable to speak. We finished our coffee, made no plans for another meeting, but didn't rule it out either. When she left, she squeezed my hand briefly. Thank you, Dad, for not giving up on me completely. You're my daughter. I never gave up. I just had to protect myself while you figured things out. After she was gone, I sat alone with my cooling coffee and the check on the table. $30,000. A first installment on a debt that would take years to repay. But it wasn't about the money. It had never been about the money. It was about Victoria learning that actions have consequences, that integrity matters more than success, That love is something you demonstrate through consistent, difficult choices over time. Lessons I wished I'd taught her better when she was young. Lessons she was finally painfully learning now. I pulled out my phone and called Kenneth. "Hey Theodore, everything okay with the boys?" "Boys are fine. I just had coffee with Victoria." There was a pause. "Oh, how did that go?" I looked out the window at the Manhattan street, at people rushing past with their own complicated lives and broken relationships and small acts of courage. "Surprisingly," I said, hopeful. "Really. She's in therapy. She's paying back what she stole. She's doing the work, Kenneth. Real work." "That's—" His voice caught. "That's good. That's really good. The boys will be happy to hear you two are talking again." "We're not there yet. It'll be a long time before we're a family again in any real sense. But maybe we're on the road." After we hung up, I sat with that thought. The road. Not the destination. Not some fantasy of everything being perfect and all wounds healed. Just the road. One conversation, one check, one moment of honest tears at a time. 3 more years would pass before all of us, me, Victoria, Kenneth, Jackson, Noah, would sit together in the same room without court orders or supervised visits or lawyers drafting agreements. 3 years of therapy sessions and repayment checks and awkward coffee meetings and slow, painful growth. But this was a start. And sometimes a start is all you can ask for. 3 years after I reclaimed my house, Jackson turned 10 years old. And for the first time since everything fell apart, our entire family sat together in one room. The backyard was full of children's voices, Jackson and Noah's friends from school running through the garden that Eleanor and I had planted decades ago. The red maples were in full autumn color, the same trees that had witnessed Eleanor's last afternoon, now rustling with laughter and soccer balls and birthday chaos. Jackson and Noah were almost unrecognizable from the scared 7-year-olds who'd been caught in their mother's war. At 10, they were confident, curious kind. Jackson wanted to be an engineer. Noah still loved to draw, and his sketches of bridges and buildings covered the walls of their room upstairs. They'd spent last weekend with me working on a model of the Brooklyn project, asking questions about load-bearing walls and foundation design. I was arranging plates on the outdoor table when I heard the side gate open. Victoria walked through carrying a wrapped present, her steps hesitant. She'd cut her hair shorter. She looked professional, but not pretentious blazer and jeans, simple jewelry. 3 years of therapy and hard work had changed more than her wardrobe. Our eyes met across the yard. I walked over and opened my arms. She stepped into them, and I hugged her, brief but real. "Welcome home, Victoria." Her breath caught. "Thanks, Dad." The party unfolded around us. Charles Morrison was there with his wife, telling Jackson stories about his grandfather's legendary Harbor Towers design. Patricia Hayes sat with Daniel Foster, both of them looking pleased that the crisis they'd helped navigate had found resolution. Kenneth arrived with his girlfriend, a kind woman who taught elementary school, and whom the boys adored. He caught my eye and nodded a silent acknowledgement of how far we'd all come. Kenneth had been sober for 4 years now. He and Victoria had divorced 2 years ago, amicably, finally mature enough to recognize they'd never been right for each other. But they'd become excellent co-parents. I'd watched them coordinate schedules, attend school conferences together, split holidays fairly. They'd learned to put Jackson and Noah first. Mid-afternoon, Victoria found me by the drink table. She pulled an envelope from her purse. "Last one," she said quietly. I opened it. A check for $8,000, the final installment of the $400,000 she'd stolen. "You did it," I said. "It took 3 years and working every extra shift I could get, but yes, I did it." She looked at me. "I needed to finish this before today, before Jackson's party. I needed to walk into this house without that debt hanging over me. How does it feel like I can finally breathe?" She glanced across the yard to where Patricia was watching us. I told her the same thing earlier. She said you'd be proud. I am. Later, as the sun began to set and the children were attacking birthday cake, I stood and tapped my glass. The conversations quieted. I want to say something, I began. 3 years ago, this house stopped being a home. It was just a building, beautiful, yes, but empty of what mattered. I was alone here fighting to reclaim not just the property, but my life, my dignity, my relationship with my grandchildren. I looked around at the faces gathered in my backyard. Today, this house is home again. Not because I won some legal battle, though I did, but because the people who matter are here. Because my grandsons know their grandfather loves them. Because old friends showed up when I needed them. I nodded at Charles Patricia Daniel. And because family, even when it breaks, can sometimes heal. My gaze found Victoria. She was crying silently, one hand pressed to her mouth. I'm grateful for second chances, I said. For the opportunity to be better than I was, to love more wisely, to set boundaries that protected me while leaving the door open for change. And I'm grateful to everyone here who believed that change was possible. I raised my glass. To Jackson, to being 10, and to all of us who've learned that forgiveness isn't about forgetting, it's about choosing hope over bitterness one day at a time. Hear, hear, Charles said, and everyone drank. After the guests left and the boys had gone inside to play video games, Victoria and I cleaned up together. We worked in comfortable silence, gathering plates and cups, folding chairs. Kenneth's girlfriend had taken Kenneth home. Patricia had hugged me goodnight, and the house was settling into evening quiet. I got promoted, Victoria said suddenly. 3 months ago, Senior Director of Operations. I didn't tell you because I wanted to make sure it stuck, that I earned it through my work and not through connections or manipulation. That's wonderful, Victoria, truly. It's strange. Everything I wanted before status, money, recognition, I have some of it now. But it feels different. Better. Because I know I earned it honestly. Because I'm not trying to prove anything to anyone except myself. I set down the stack of plates I was carrying. Would you come to Thanksgiving here at the house? You, Kenneth, the boys? Just family. She looked startled. Really? Really? If you want to. I'd like that. She wiped her eyes. Dad, I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I'm sorry for everything, and I love you. I pulled her into a proper hug this time, not the brief greeting from earlier, but the kind of embrace a father gives a daughter. I love you too. That night, after everyone was gone and the house was quiet, I stood on the balcony looking up at the stars. Eleanor and I used to do this, count constellations, make up stories about the patterns, dream about the future. We did it, I said to her to the night to myself. The house is ours again. Victoria's finding her way back. The boys are happy. Kenneth's sober and building a good life. The house behind me was truly mine, not just legally but emotionally. Every room held new memories, now better memories. The reading nook where I spent Sunday mornings with the boys. The kitchen where we made pancakes. The office where I worked on projects that excited me. The master bedroom where I slept peacefully without fear or resentment. Victoria was finding her way back to being my daughter. Not the daughter she'd been before that innocence was gone forever. But someone new, someone harder won and more real. Someone who'd faced her worst self and chosen to change. I was free. Not free from the past, those scars would always be part of me. But free from its grip. Free from bitterness. Free to love my grandchildren, to enjoy my work, to build new relationships, to honor Eleanor's memory, without being imprisoned by grief. And that, I realized, was enough. Almost. There was still one more thing I needed to do. One final piece of the story that required closure. Tomorrow I'd make the call. Tomorrow I'd start the last chapter. But tonight I stood under Eleanor's stars and felt for the first time in 6 years, completely at peace. 6 years after Eleanor passed, I finally understood what she'd been trying to teach me all along. Legacy isn't built in blueprints. It's written in the hearts of the people we love. Tonight, sitting at the mahogany desk Eleanor and I designed together, I'm writing this letter for Jackson and Noah to read someday, when they're old enough to understand. The silver cufflinks Eleanor gave me rest beside the paper. They caught the light during every battle, conservatorship, hearings, visitations, struggles, the long road back to dignity. They remind me of what I almost lost and what I fought to reclaim. I want my grandsons to know 5 truths I learned the hard way. First, kindness is not weakness, but never let anyone mistake it for permission. When Eleanor died, I thought opening my heart to Victoria's family was honoring my wife's memory. I believed generosity meant saying yes to every request, absorbing every slight, shouldering every burden. I was wrong. Kindness without boundaries isn't love, it's self-destruction. Victoria didn't see a generous father. She saw a resource to be drained. The moment I stopped defending my dignity, she took everything: my bedroom, my place at the table, my voice in my own home. Boys, be kind. Be generous. But the instant someone treats your kindness as weakness, draw the line. Compassion that costs you your self-respect isn't compassion, it's surrender. Second, boundaries are not cruelty. They are the highest form of love. For 2 years I told myself that saying no to Victoria would be selfish, that a good father sacrifices everything. I was so afraid of being called difficult or ungrateful that I let her walk all over me. It nearly destroyed me. The day I finally said no, when I refused to sign over my assets, when I stood up in court, when I told Victoria I wouldn't give her cash without accountability, I thought I was being harsh. I wasn't. I was teaching her that love doesn't mean enabling someone's worst impulses. Setting boundaries saved both of us. It forced Victoria to face herself, and it gave me back my life. Boys, remember, saying no to someone you love is sometimes the most loving thing you can do. Third, forgiveness does not mean forgetting. 3 years after I reclaimed my house, Victoria sent me a letter. She apologized. She started therapy. She paid back $30,000 of the $400,000 she stole. I forgave her not because she deserved it, but because I needed to let go of the anger eating me alive. Forgiveness freed me. But I don't trust Victoria the way I once did. I watch her actions, not just her words. I rebuilt our relationship slowly, carefully, with clear boundaries in place. Forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. One you can choose to give, the other must be earned. Boys, if someone hurts you, you can forgive them and still protect yourself. Forgiveness is for your peace, not their convenience. Fourth, your legacy is not the things you own, it's the people you love. I spent 40 years building an architecture empire worth $95 million. I designed towers that touched the sky, estates that graced magazine covers. I thought those buildings were my legacy. I was wrong. When Victoria tried to take my house, I almost let it destroy me. I realized that clinging to possessions was poisoning my relationships. The house didn't matter. What mattered was that you boys felt safe, that you knew your grandfather loved you, that you grew up understanding what real family looks like. Boys, build your careers, create beautiful things, but never let your possessions define you. People remember how you made them feel, not what you owned. Fifth, it is never too late to start over. I was 60 years old when I stood in that courtroom and fought for my life. 60. Most people would say that's too old to rebuild. They're wrong. I took a consulting job. I mentored young architects. I fought for visitation rights. I restored my home and my reputation. Starting over at 60 taught me that resilience has no expiration date. Boys, if life knocks you down, and it will get back up. Whether you're 20 or 60 or 80, you can always choose to begin again. My phone vibrates on the desk. Victoria's name lights up the screen. I answer. Hi, Dad. Her voice is soft, a little uncertain, but warm. Just wanted to say goodnight. The boys are asleep. They had fun at the party. I'm glad, I tell her. Thank you for bringing them. Of course. They love you. A pause. I love you too, Dad. I love you too, sweetheart. We hang up. I stand and walk to the window, looking out over the moonlit Atlantic. Eleanor's photograph sits on the sill, her smile frozen in time. I pick it up, trace her face with my thumb. We did it, I whisper. Not perfect, but okay. I set the photo down and return to the desk. The letter to Jackson and Noah waits, nearly finished. At my daughter's dinner party, she introduced me as our caretaker. It cost me everything, my dignity, my home, nearly my relationship with you boys. But fighting back gave me something priceless. The knowledge that I could lose everything and still stand. That I could be humiliated and still rise. That love, real love, requires both forgiveness and boundaries. This is my legacy to you. Not the architecture empire, not the Hamptons estate. This resilience, love, and the courage to say no when necessary. I hope you never need these lessons the way I did. But if you do know that your grandfather fought his way back, and so can you. I sign the letter, fold it carefully, and tuck it into an envelope marked, for Jackson and Noah. When you're ready. Outside, the ocean rolls on, endless and patient. Inside, the house is quiet, whole, and finally mine again. Looking back at my journey, I see a man who almost lost everything because he couldn't say one simple word, no. Family betrayal cuts deeper than any stranger's cruelty. It comes from the people you raised, the ones who know exactly where to strike. When Victoria labeled me our caretaker, she erased 60 years of sacrifice and legacy in a single sentence. Don't be like me. Don't mistake silence for peace or sacrifice for love. I ignored every red flag, the stolen bedroom, the erased photos, the forged signatures, because I was terrified of conflict. That fear nearly cost me my home, my grandsons, and my dignity. Grandpa stories like mine aren't rare. They're hidden in silence, buried under shame. Too many elders suffer family betrayal in quiet desperation, believing they deserve it. Here's what I learned. Boundaries aren't walls, they're bridges that protect relationships by demanding respect. Forgiveness isn't weakness, but it must walk hand in hand with accountability. Legacy isn't the empire you build or the house you own. It's whether your grandchildren remember you stood for something. God gave me Eleanor for 33 years. When she passed, I thought my purpose died with her. I was wrong. He gave me 6 more years to learn that love without self-respect is martyrdom, not virtue. Grandpa's stories of resilience matter more than Grandpa's stories of surrender. If you recognize yourself in my early chapters, the people pleaser, the silent martyr, stop. Draw the line today. Family betrayal taught me that your kindness is a gift, not a ransom. Protect it fiercely, because people who truly love you will never ask you to destroy yourself to prove your devotion. Your voice matters. Your boundaries matter. You matter. Thank you for joining me on this journey. Drop a comment. Sharing your thoughts, what would you do if you were in Theodore's shoes, dealing with that level of pressure from your own family? I'm genuinely curious about your perspective. If this story touched you, think about subscribing to catch future content. Quick heads up though, inspired by real patterns of elder dynamics, some details were dramatized for narrative purposes. If this isn't your cup of tea, no worries, plenty of other videos to explore.